My parents confessed they had me just to be my ADHD brother's caretaker. I sacrificed my entire childhood for him. But when years later they came begging for $15,000 for his legal problems, I responded with one word that broke them. I'm 28 years old. I work in digital marketing, and honestly, I still can't believe this is my life now. Like, a life that's actually mine. You know what I mean? Because for the first 22 years of my existence, I was basically an extra in someone else's movie, and that someone was my brother, Zachary. And before you think I'm being dramatic or exaggerating, let me tell you what it was like growing up being literally invisible in my own family. Because when I say invisible, I don't mean it in a poetic way or anything, I mean it literally. My parents saw me as an extension of my brother, not as a separate person with my own needs and wants. Zachary is 5 years older than me. He's like 33 now, and he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was around 6 or 7 years old. And look, I'm not saying ADHD isn't real or that it isn't difficult. I understand that perfectly. But what my parents did with that information was basically use it as an excuse, so Zachary never had to face consequences. For anything. Literally anything. He could do whatever he wanted, behave however he wanted, treat me however he wanted, and always the response was, "Oh, but Zachary has ADHD. You have to understand. You have to be more understanding. You have to give him space." And there I was, like, what about me? Do I not matter? Or what? My earliest memories are of Zachary yelling at me, pushing me, destroying my things. I remember when I was like 4 years old, maybe 5, I had built this super tall tower with my Lego blocks. It had taken me hours because I was small, and my hands didn't coordinate that well yet, and I was super proud of that tower. Zachary walked into my room, looked at it, and without saying anything, kicked it to the floor. I cried. Obviously. I ran to my parents, and my mom just said, "Oh, honey, Zachary is having a bad day. Why don't you share your toys with him so he feels better?" I mean, seriously? Not even a scolding. Nothing. And that's how all my birthdays were. Every single one, without exception. The day that was supposed to be about me always ended up being about Zachary. When I turned 7, my parents organized a small party for me with like 10 kids from my class. Nothing fancy, but I was super excited because it was my day, you know? Well, Zachary, who was 12 at the time, decided he didn't like that I was getting attention. He started throwing a tantrum in the middle of the party, screaming that nobody was paying attention to him, that everyone was being unfair, and he ended up throwing my cake on the floor, like he just grabbed it and threw it like it was nothing. My friends left, the party was canceled, and my parents spent the rest of the day consoling Zachary while I stayed in my room, cleaning cake remnants from my clothes. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody said happy birthday to me after that. When I turned 10, I specifically asked for no party, that I just wanted to go to dinner at my favorite restaurant, this Italian place I loved where they made an incredible margarita pizza. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if it was something small and quiet, Zachary wouldn't ruin it. But obviously I was wrong. At the restaurant, he started complaining that the food was taking too long, then that his plate was too hot, then that there was too much noise, and he ended up making such a big scene that they asked us to leave. I didn't even get to try my pizza. In the car on the way home, my dad told me, "Next time think more about your brother before choosing a place, okay?" As if it was my fault that Zachary couldn't behave in public. The worst was when I turned 13. I had been saving money for months, that my grandparents gave me for Christmas and my birthday, and saving any bills I found or earned helping neighbors with random things. I had this plan. See, I wanted to go to Disneyland alone with my parents, without Zachary, because he had already been like 3 times and I had never been. I talked to my parents weeks in advance, showed them I had money for my ticket, explained how important it was to me, and they said yes. They told me yes, that we were going to go, just the 3 of us, that it was going to be my birthday gift. I was so happy I couldn't even sleep well the weeks before the trip. Well, turns out like 3 days before the trip, Zachary found out. I don't know how. I think he overheard my parents talking or something, and he started making a huge drama about how it wasn't fair that I was going and he wasn't, that he wanted to go too. That why did everyone hate him, and exclude him. And guess what? They told me, "Oh, honey, your brother feels really bad. We don't want him to get depressed. He's going to come with us, but I promise it'll still be your special day." Lie. It was the worst day of my life up to that point. Zachary spent the whole time complaining about everything, about the lines, the heat, the food, the rides, the people. I wanted to go on. Space Mountain. It had been my dream forever. But Zachary said he was scared and that if I went on it, he would be alone and sad. So my parents told me, better not, that we should all go together to something Zachary wanted. We ended up leaving early because Zachary was tired. I didn't go on any of the rides I wanted. I didn't buy any souvenirs because I spent all my money on the ticket and food. I cried all night in the hotel, silently so nobody would hear me, because I had already learned that expressing my feelings only made my parents angry at me for being selfish. That's how my entire childhood and adolescence was, honestly. I was like a ghost in my own house. I existed only to make Zachary's life easier. If he wanted to play with something of mine, I had to lend it to him. If he was in a bad mood, I had to be quiet so I wouldn't bother him. If he wanted to watch TV, I couldn't watch what I wanted. My parents never went to my school events because they always coincided with something of Zachary's, or because Zachary didn't want to stay home alone, or because they had to take Zachary to therapy or to I don't know what thing. I made the honor roll throughout middle school. Nobody ever celebrated it. I won a state writing contest when I was 15. They didn't even notice until the prize arrived in the mail like 2 weeks later. When I was 17, in my senior year of high school, I started applying to universities. And I didn't apply to any nearby. They were all at least 6 hours away, many on the other side of the country. My parents thought I was going to go to the local community college, live at home, save money, but I knew that if I did that, I was never going to get out of there. I was going to end up being Zachary's caretaker forever, and that simply couldn't happen. My grandparents, my mom's parents, had always been the only ones who really saw me as a person. They noticed when I was sad. They asked me how I was. They listened when I talked. I told them my plan, and they told me they were going to help me, that they were going to pay for whatever I needed to go far away and start over. In March of my senior year, I received an acceptance letter from a university on the East Coast, like 3,000 miles from my hometown. I had a partial scholarship, and my grandparents promised to cover the rest. I was so excited that I ran to tell my parents, thinking that maybe, just maybe, they would be proud of me. I was wrong. They sat me down in the living room, both with super serious faces, and my dad was the one who spoke. He told me, "Look, there's something we need to tell you, something we maybe should have told you a long time ago, but we never found the right moment." And then they dropped the bomb. They told me that when Zachary was like 7 or 8 years old, after his ADHD diagnosis, the doctors had warned them that Zachary was probably going to need special support and care for his entire life. They were worried about what was going to happen when they got old or died, who was going to take care of Zachary, and so they decided to have another child. They had me, specifically, deliberately, so that I would be Zachary's caretaker when they couldn't anymore. I wasn't an accident. I wasn't planned because they wanted me or because they wanted to expand the family. I was planned with a specific purpose, and that purpose was to be my brother's safety net. My mom told me this. I remember it word for word because it was burned into my brain like with fire. We always knew your role in this family was important. That's why we raised you to be understanding and patient with your brother, so you would understand his needs. Now that you're going to be an adult, we expect you to take your responsibilities seriously and stay close to help us with him. I sat there, literally couldn't process what I was hearing. Responsibility? My responsibility? I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose to have a brother with special needs. I didn't choose to be the invisible second fiddle my entire life. And now they were telling me that all of that was intentional, that I was basically brought into this world to be an unpaid family employee. I told them no, that I was going to college, that I was going to live my own life. And my dad got angry, like his face turned red, and he told me I was being selfish, that after everything they had done for me, how could I abandon my family like that? The conversation ended there, but the tension in the house during the following months was unbearable. My parents oscillated between completely ignoring me and trying to make me feel guilty. Zachary, obviously, was super angry that I was leaving, because that meant he was going to have to do things for himself, something he had never had to do. He tried to sabotage my things, hid important documents I needed for college, even told me he hated me and hoped I would fail in life. Honestly, at that point nothing, Zachary said, affected me anymore. I had developed like this emotional armor after years of his constant bullying. In August, right before I left for college, we had one last family dinner. It was horribly awkward. Nobody talked. And when we finished eating, my mom told me that if I left, not to expect any kind of support from them, not emotional or financial, that I was on my own. I told them I understood perfectly, that my grandparents were going to help me. And my dad said something I'll never forget. When you fail and have to come crawling back, don't think we're going to receive you with open arms. You're going to have to earn your place in this family again. My grandparents took me to the airport. I cried the whole way, not from sadness but from relief, like I felt as if they had lifted this giant weight off my shoulders. My grandmother hugged me at the airport and told me, "You're going to be okay. You're going to build a beautiful life far from all this, and we're going to be here for you always." And they kept their word. Honestly, throughout college, they called me every week, visited me when they could, sent me packages with homemade cookies and little notes of encouragement. College was difficult in many ways, but it was also the most liberating time of my life. I worked part-time at a coffee shop to have extra money for my expenses. My grandparents covered tuition and housing, but I wanted to be as independent as possible. I made real friends for the first time, people who saw me for who I was, not as someone's brother or as an assigned caretaker. I joined a writing club, picked up that love for writing that I had to suppress for years because there was never time or space for my hobbies. I graduated with honors, got a job at a digital marketing agency in a different city, bigger, and moved there. I built a life from scratch, a life that was completely mine. During those years, like 6 full years, I didn't talk to my parents or Zachary. I blocked their numbers, didn't respond. To emails, nothing. My grandparents kept me vaguely informed of what was happening with them, but I didn't ask much because honestly I didn't want to know. What I did know was that Zachary never got a stable job, still lived with my parents, and according to my grandparents, his behavior had gotten worse over the years. Apparently, he had had several incidents with neighbors, with people in stores, things like that. But my parents always defended him and never made him face real consequences. Like 8 months ago, in March of this year, I received an email from my mom. I didn't open it immediately because seeing her name in my inbox gave me like anxiety, but eventually, I opened it. It was long, like 3 pages, basically telling me that Zachary was in serious trouble. Turns out he had been harassing some kids in the neighborhood. Apparently, he would yell weird things at them when they passed by the house. On one occasion, he followed them to a park, and the kids' parents reported him to the police. Zachary was arrested. He has charges for harassment and threatening behavior, and he needs a lawyer and intensive therapy. The email ended asking me for money. Like they were asking me for $15,000 to cover the legal and treatment costs, telling me I was part of the family and had to help, that they couldn't pay for everything alone. I read that email like 3 times, not because I was considering helping, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. After 6 years of silence, after how they treated me my whole life, after cutting me off completely when I left for college, now they wanted my money. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't apologize for anything. They just wanted me to function as the family ATM. I responded to them. The shortest response of my life. No. My mom responded immediately, saying she couldn't believe I was so cruel, that Zachary was my brother, that family helps each other, blah blah blah. I sent her another email. This one, longer, explaining exactly why I wasn't going to help. I reminded her that they explicitly told me they had me just to be Zachary's caretaker, that they had treated me as invisible my entire childhood, that they never celebrated my achievements or were present for me, that they cut me off financially when I decided to have my own life. I told her that if Zachary needed therapy, that was something he should have received years ago when it was their responsibility as parents to provide it, not my responsibility as a brother now. I told her I didn't owe them anything, that I had built my life alone, with help from my grandparents but without them, and that I wasn't going to allow them to use me again. She didn't respond to that email. but my dad did. His email was short and angry, calling me ungrateful, selfish, saying I was going to regret turning my back on my family, that someday I was going to need them, and they were going to remember how I treated them first. I blocked him. I blocked both of them again, this time on all possible platforms, and asked my grandparents to please not pass along any more information about them unless it was absolutely necessary. Through my grandparents, I found out like 2 months ago that Zachary ended up accepting a plea deal, or whatever it's called, like he reached an agreement with the prosecution. He has to do mandatory therapy, community service hours, and he has a restraining order from the neighborhood kids and their families. My parents had to sell their car to pay for everything, and according to my grandparents, they're very resentful of me for not helping. Honestly, I don't care. I know, maybe that sounds harsh or cold, but I spent 22 years of my life being used and minimized by them. I don't owe them more years of guilt or responsibility. Now I'm in a much better place, honestly. I have a job I like, I make good money, I have close friends who are more family than my biological family ever was. I live in a small, but nice apartment that I decorated exactly how I wanted without having to consider anyone else's needs or preferences. I recently started therapy, not because I'm in crisis or anything, but because I want to process all this in a healthy way. I understand how my childhood affected me and make sure I don't carry those patterns forward in my life. My therapist has helped me a ton to validate my feelings, to understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish, that I deserve to have my own life. I'm planning a trip to Europe for next summer, something I always wanted to do, but never could because when I was a kid, all the extra money went to Zachary's needs. I'm going for 3 weeks, alone, to tour cities, to eat delicious food, to see art, to exist in spaces where nobody knows me and nobody expects anything from me. My grandparents are super excited for me. My grandmother already sent me a list of places I have to visit in Italy because she went like 40 years ago. Sometimes I feel guilty. I'm not going to lie. There are moments when I think, what if Zachary really needs help? What if I could make a difference? But then I remember everything, every ruined birthday, every ignored achievement, the conversation where they told me I was conceived with a utilitarian purpose, and the guilt goes away. It's not my job to fix Zachary. It never was. And the fact that my parents wanted to make it my job doesn't make it real or valid. Last week, my grandmother called me and told me she saw my mom at the supermarket. Apparently, my mom asked her about me, how I was, what I was doing, and when my grandmother told her I'm doing well, that I have a good job and that I'm planning a trip to Europe, my mom started crying right there in the middle of the cereal aisle. She told my grandmother that she missed her son, that she didn't understand why I was so resentful, that she had only tried to do her best for both of her children. My grandmother, who is the sweetest person in the world, normally told her something that made me love her even more. You told your son you had him to be his brother's caretaker. You treated him like he didn't matter his entire life. And now you cry because he decided to matter to himself. Don't cry for him. Cry for yourself and for what you lost through your own actions. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my parents or Zachary again. Honestly, right now, I don't want one. Maybe that'll change in the future. Maybe not. But what I do know is that I'm not going to force anything or let myself be pressured to feel things I don't feel. I spent too much time of my life accommodating other people's needs and emotions, sacrificing mine in the process. Now I'm living for myself, making decisions based on what I want and need. And that feels good. It feels like finally breathing after being underwater for years. I guess if there's anything I've learned from all this, it's that biological family isn't always real family. That being born into a group of people doesn't obligate you to keep them in your life if they hurt you, and that choosing your own peace over others' comfort isn't selfishness, it's survival. And I'm okay with that. I'm more than okay, honestly. For the first time in my life, I feel complete, like a whole person, and not like the half that exists to complete someone else.